Welcome to Carousel. I'm your host, Marcelle Soviero, and tonight we're going to hop on the carousel as we do every week and find interesting people and talk about interesting things. Tonight I'm so happy to have with us Ben FInane. Ben is the founding editor-in-chief of Listen, Life with Music and Culture, a multi-award winning magazine that was voted the best new magazine of 2009. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you became an editor of a nationally renowned music magazine.
I was told there would be whiskey. No?
No.
My career has sort of vacillated between arts administration and editorial jobs. So in a way, this made the most of both of them. I actually started my career after college working at Carnegie Hall in their fundraising office.
Okay.
And I did a little more fundraising for other people and realizing that fundraising was not my thing.
Right.
So I made a shift to editorial, worked for a few websites, worked at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, first in their marketing department, also for their music school. And when we launched Listen magazine, I was actually working for Playbill. In their classic arts division, which would be the playbills that do concerts and operas and ballet.
Terrific. So you've always sort of been kind of hanging around the music scene,
very much.
Classical music and literature scene.
I'd say around 2002, I started writing about music on the side for the New York Star Ledger, for the San Francisco Chronicle, for Time Out New York. And I knew that music journalism, or at least the few articles that I was writing, that wasn't going to be maybe a career, but I thought I'll just keep doing this no matter what my day job is.
You loved it.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And so you made it your career.
I sure did.
That's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Very much. I'm real proud of this magazine. It's a print quarterly. We underwent a transformation in tagline recently from life with classical music to life with music and culture.
Okay, just opening it up a little bit.
Very much. We're opening the musical and the cultural umbrella. And we use classical music certainly as our jumping off point, but it goes into other kinds of music, into jazz, into folk, into rock, as well as visual arts, as well as performing arts, architecture, cuisine, travel, you name it. But
so you're kind of starting a cultural conversation.
Absolutely.
With the magazine.
That is very much the idea.
Terrific. That sounds absolutely fascinating. So now here you are, sort of living your dream. You'd been doing musical writing and wanting to do that. Now you're the editor-in-chief of what is really the only magazine on the newsstands that's really devoted to classical and culture. So tell us a little bit, you have interviewed everybody. Tell us a little bit about some of the famous personalities, or one of the famous personalities that was the most fun for you to talk to.
Well, I'm a pianist as well,
right.
And I was very fortunate to interview a lot of great classical pianists. One of them is Maurizio Pullini, who some of your viewers will know. A very cool Italian pianist, and I met him at a hotel on the Upper East Side. And I sat down and I asked him a question, and he said, "Can we stop? Can we stop?" And he waited for his espresso, and he smoked an entire cigarette in front of me, put the cigarette down, killed his espresso, and said, "Okay, now I'm ready now."
He's ready.
I'm ready. But that was a real pleasure.
Yeah, that's a personality. So I assume in the music business, you meet a lot of personalities.
For sure.
Right.
Artistic personalities, I guess we could say.
Right.
And they're all very different, but they're all, it's a cliche, but they're all interesting in their own way.
Sure.
And I think the trick when you're talking to someone is find out what is it that interests them.
Right.
Why, if you get an artist to talk about what they're passionate about, you're going to learn something.
Right. And
if you get them to start just sort of listing their resume or giving you a press release, then you're not going to get anything out of it. So that's always the thing I want to do, is figure out what is it that they want to tell me, and then just go there. It's very easy ultimately.
Well, if you're a good reporter. So tell us about one of the women pianists or artists that you have interviewed, and what that was like.
I spoke with Yuja Wang, who is another great pianist, a younger pianist, younger than me. Mm-hmm. And what I was really, what I found out from her is that there was a lot of music that she was saving to play because she didn't feel that she was yet mature enough to play it. And I thought that was a very honest thing to say.
That's amazing.
And also, you know, it was admirable to sort of say, okay, I love this music, but I don't think I understand it yet enough to really bring anything to the table.
Wow, I love that.
And that's the trick, right?
Yeah, to get that piece.
Right, but also as an artist, if you're going to play something, you better have something to say about it, especially in the classical world where everything is basically a cover, right? The masterworks have been written. We know what they are. Right. So if I'm going to spend time to listen to this masterwork from your hands or from your mouth or from your instrument, you know, you have to bring something original to the table.
So it's almost an interpretation.
Absolutely, it's an interpretation. And you know, that takes thought and that takes a lot of time, and that's why they all practice so much.
And do you think that actually shows through the playing?
Absolutely.
That some of the best performers are those that think in that in terms of finding the gem in that music and their interpretation?
I think the best playing comes from performers who are trying to realize composer intent, where there's not any ego in the playing. It's more a question of how do I best convey the message of this music? How do I unlock it for the listener?
Yeah, that's great. Which brings me to a conversation that I often have, which is the artist the person who composed the music or the person playing it?
Certainly, I think as an artist, you have to have a kinship with the composer. You have to be able to see inside that music and think in the same way, think along the same lines, understand what the message is, and then you get to figure out how to present it. And that's an exciting thing to do.
It's its own creative process. Mm-hmm. It's another kind of art. You know, there's that original, and the way I see it, it's that original composing, and then it's that interpretation that is also an act of art.
Right.
Maybe.
Sure.
That's how I think of it. So what is your day like as an editor-in-chief? Do you spend your time going around the world interviewing performers, or is it a little less
I wish it was that
glamorous
sexy.
Than that?
Yeah, international man of mystery. I have been fortunate to be able to take trips to Europe and to Asia and to other places in North America for my work, but that's certainly not the bulk of my time.
Right.
There are a lot of logistics, as you know, to putting out a publication.
Right.
So some of that is fun, and some of that is just getting in the trenches and figuring out, okay, here's a piece that has something in it, and I like where it's headed, but it's not quite getting there. And then you have to figure out what is it that's missing. And you work with the writer, or maybe you work with it yourself, and try to develop a through line to the piece in the same way a great artist develops a through line to a piece of music.
So are you talking about kind of finding the angle in
finding the angle and making the message as clean and as clear as possible.
Right.
That's line editing, and that's copy editing, and that's proofreading. And then of course there's, as a small publication, you're always wearing many different hats. Maybe you're doing social media, maybe you're doing some videos, maybe you're trying to figure out how many of the next issue to print and how many to send here, and are we doing special events?
Right.
So I don't have the luxury of just sort of being an editor from 9 to 5, but I don't think I'd want that anyway. It's always
a lot of everything.
Yeah, it's exciting to be able to explore all facets of what it is to put out a publication.
So you're one of the first, as we said, about focusing on classical music and culture. What do you think the environment for that is? Is it growing or going away? Is the readership old and leaving you, or are we developing new musicians?
Well, people get older every day. So,
there you go.
So that's one thing. There's a bit of a trope of, well, classical music is these gray-haired audiences, but then again, we all grow up and we all get older. And I think one reason that classical audiences tend to be older audiences is that it's when we're older that we have the time to devote to it, right? Mm-hmm. And classical music is something that pays dividends for investing yourself into it. That said, there's really not a barrier of entry. You can go tomorrow night and go hear a Beethoven symphony, and you will get something out of it. And that's a message that I really try to strike every issue, is that this is not something that you need to read 20 books and listen to 40 records before you feel comfortable going to the concert hall.
Right, because it does have that air of sort of, it's erudite, it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for the older generation and people that can, you know, have the time to listen. But, you know, clearly I would think one of your objectives is to bring that new readership in, those younger
Mm-hmm.
people who are interested in classical music and culture. Is that hard to bring them in, or is it working?
I don't think it's hard at all. I think you just have to stay relevant. You have to be relevant in present day. And there's a reason that this music has lasted hundreds of years. It's because it's very good.
Right.
And that's really the difference between pop music and music that lasts. Mm-hmm. Something that's in the charts today, we may not be listening to in 10 years.
Right.
But, you know, again, we're going to be listening to Beethoven's Seventh at the end of the century, I'm fairly certain.
Right, right. No, that is fascinating. I guess the other question is, you do have to go and meet a lot of different personalities, artists, writers, composers. We have a lot of different egos and personalities. Who do you think is the most interesting personality you've met in the field of classical music?
You know, when I spoke to Joshua Bell, who is a great American violinist, for me that was the most surprising interview that I had, because I found him to be not only humble, but also on some level slightly insecure, which is, it was surprising, but it also just sort of shows you how there are different perspectives. He was talking about YouTube, and he was talking about how people can comment on his performances on YouTube anonymously, and it's very harsh. And sometimes that actually depressed him. So he tries to stay off YouTube, and he tries to stay away from that sort of commentary. And I think he sort of hit it on the head. It's very easy to throw stones when you're not sitting face to face with someone. And that may be one of the downsides of this access to media, is we can have this sort of anonymous criticism, which can lead to cyberbullying, can lead to other things.
So many things.
Yeah, so that's certainly the downside of technology. Taken to an extreme,
right.
Maybe you have a small terrorist group that many, many moons ago was just able to talk to their friends in their town.
But
and now they have a global platform, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, as an editor of a magazine, I'm excited to have, you know, a website. I'm excited to have social media. I'm excited to have videos that can go with my magazine.
Right.
But, you know, again, a downside to that is that I guess bad messages or hateful messages can also be spread.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But that's fascinating that someone like Joshua Bell could slightly be even impacted
well,
by a
everyone's
general
human
comment.
at the end of the day.
Right.
And no one likes to be bullied with foul language, whether you're one of the great violinists of the world or whether you're a 15-year-old in gym class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's part of that phenomenon of getting the interview right with such incredible figures. You were talking about finding what motivates them and what they're passionate about, and it's also finding what is authentic.
That's
the
right.
real person.
That's right.
And that's what really makes a great interview.
Oprah Winfrey said famously, and God bless her, the only thing you can sell is authenticity.
Oh, I hadn't heard
And
that.
that's absolutely true. And so I think that's, you know, whether it's my magazine or any magazine, it has to be believable. We have to be talking about truth or approaching truth in order for our stories to ring true or to sell in Oprah's language.
Right. Otherwise it's very superfluous, right? And it's not authentic, and it doesn't really grab the reader. But Listen is sort of known for that in-depth interview and really uncovering that, and you're in large part the one that does all those interviews, so that's absolutely fabulous. So take us now to, you do have a print magazine, and I noticed when you introduced it tonight, you say a print quarterly,
Right.
but you are a lot of other things. You're doing a lot of things digitally.
Sure.
What, as an editor, as you've grown in the field, is different now? Do you have digital subscriptions? Do you have to do all that? And
Well, we started as a print quarterly, and we remain a print quarterly. But if you subscribe to the magazine, there's also, you get the digital version for free, which is basically the tablet version.
okay.
And in addition to that, we have, like I said, we have a website, and we have social media, and we're on Facebook and Twitter and posting YouTube videos. Because again, I think now it's important, no matter what your home medium is for your publication, you want to be on as many different platforms as you possibly can. I think you may remember around 2009, which is really when we launched, there was the great magazine Death Watch, and all these magazines were folding.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
People were saying, okay, print is dead, print is dead.
Right.
But it didn't happen. And what did happen is there's now sort of an uneasy relationship between print media and online media and digital media, and they all have to learn to coexist. And it's great for a reader or for a consumer, because you have all
They
these
just get
options.
all
right?
the more things.
Yeah,
right.
but as an editor, I need to make sure that I'm reaching as many people as I can
Right.
on as many different media as I can.
Do you find that producing that much content, because you can't actually have the same piece on all these media necessarily all the time, so do you find that the content itself gets watered down because you have to produce so much of it?
Well, what we do instead of producing watered down content is we aggregate great
Really good
content from
content.
elsewhere.
Okay.
And that's, for me, that's our social media side. We're not producing original pieces for social media. I don't sit down and blog every day.
Okay.
But there's a lot of great people in the world who
do.
have a lot of great things to say on music and culture, and I don't mind drawing attention to that.
So
That doesn't take away from Listen and from the pieces that we produce. And I don't, subscribe to the idea of like, oh, I can't highlight other media because then I'm taking away.
Right.
I mean, we're all, at the end of the day, we're on the same team,
Right.
trying to reach people and illuminate.
Absolutely. So how do you think you've had Listen since how many years?
We're
is
in our
it?
7th year of publication.
7th year, which is huge for a new launch of a print magazine to stay in business in these days as a print publication and not just going all digital. But what would you say has your readership changed in any way? So for example, 9 years ago, was it all women and men over 70, are you in a different demographic now, or has it really stayed the same in terms of the readership?
Our core readership has probably stayed the same, but we are attracting younger readers.
So you're bringing more in.
Absolutely,
Which is
and
great.
that's the idea.
Exactly.
And across the arts, there's a similar model which is you have a core group of older listeners or viewers or readers, and then you bring in more and sort of renew and rejuvenate that base.
Right, right.
So all is according to plan so far.
Well, that's great, and I mean, I know there are probably viewers out there who are, oh, no kids listen to classical music anymore, but it seems to me that the music schools are thriving and that there are still young people studying to be performers of classical music. Am I accurate in that?
Sure,
or?
I would say there's a glut of performers these days. So
there's still a huge interest.
We're happy to give them something to read.
And people to write about, right? So tell us a little bit about your team. What does it look like? What's the team look like to have to put out a magazine these days?
Well, one fortunate thing is that our team is part of a larger team, which is to say that we are an independent quarterly, and we're part of Steinway and Sons,
Okay.
the piano makers.
The piano.
So we have access to the Steinway infrastructure, which is great.
Right.
But the core team itself is very small. There's myself, the editor. There's an art director, and then on the subscription and circulation side, yeah, there's a little bit of that. And then everyone else is freelance. All my writers are freelance contributors. My copy editor is a freelancer.
Are there a lot of writers who want to write for you, who are interested in this? I assume there probably are.
Oh, very much. And I'm always looking for new, energetic writers.
Right, new voices.
New voices with new ideas. And I will give everyone a fair shake, and I'll give everyone an assignment. Some of them, if I don't know them or their work, it'll be on spec.
Right.
But I'm always happy to hear from new people, and our bylines change quarter to quarter. We certainly probably have a core group that I like to go to, because once you find writers who can deliver on time, who
don't need much editing.
I mean, that's
a gold.
You got to go back to those folks. But yeah, again, just as we want to refresh the reader pool, we also want to refresh the voices in the magazine as well.
That makes perfect sense. So you cover, you were saying before the interview that you were going to Aspen. Do you do a lot of festivals and things?
We do. In the summer, we try to cover a lot of summer festivals. This year, I'll be going to Spoleto in South Carolina. And Listen will be in residency in the form of me in Aspen, where I'll be doing some interviewing and some roundtables and some pre-concert lectures as part of the Aspen Festival, which is a wonderful classical music festival.
Are there a lot of classical music festivals?
There are hundreds.
Really?
There are hundreds.
Really?
And that's just in North America.
See, I wouldn't expect that.
And there are hundreds more in Europe as well.
In Europe, okay. So you see a nice fit between what you're doing and the classical festival.
I do, and honestly, as the father of a 2-year-old, I probably see more music in the summer than I do during the season. I don't get around much anymore the way I used to, so I have to rely more on my contributors to keep me abreast of what's happening. Yeah.
So, well, you bring up a good point. So your daughter Daphne is 2. Do you have Did you have classical music going when she was in your wife's belly, and all this great stuff?
I didn't do any prenatal listening. And Daphne is more of a Steely Dan fan than she is of Bach and
She's not
Brahms.
a classical kid.
Well, I think kids are going to prefer a boppier, major key. Songs with a beat, absolutely. So for me, any music is good music at this age, and we will slowly bring her to Debussy and Tchaikovsky and Ravel.
Bring her up on that.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for parents who have maybe slightly older children to sort of ways to bring classical music into your everyday?
Sure. Well, my way was taking piano lessons, and I would encourage any parent of children. I'm not sure how early you can start. Maybe even as early as 5, 6, right?
I think so. Yeah.
There's really, let them try. Let them try the instrument. Before I played piano, I played violin, and I think I lasted 2 weeks. I remember playing an open A string, and I remember hearing this terrible tone and thinking, I can't do this. So let them try, and if you can get them into it, there will come a point where they stop doing it because you're telling them to, and they're doing it because they want to. And that's when you've struck musical gold, right? Right. Because then they have developed, just by rote practice, they have developed a love of music. And that's something that will be with them for their entire lives. Of course, there's all the studies that'll tell you how great it is for math and this and that.
Yeah.
But really, beyond that, I think it's a wonderful thing that you always have with you.
And it's interesting because you're sort of talking about that little person who is, finds the gold and finds that. But what about the child that really wants to stop? Would you let that, what's the whole?
Absolutely.
If it's not for you, you just let it go.
If it becomes drudgery, and if there's, I think you try to push back for a little while, because sometimes there's just peaks and valleys, and they may need a little push to get to the next peak. But if it becomes clear that Johnny or Susie doesn't want to play the flute, then hey,
you got to let it go.
Yeah, there are plenty of other things out there, certainly,
and
even within the arts, it's not play an instrument or bust,
right?
But certainly, if we're looking at entrees to music, playing music is its own door.
So we're going to close up now, but I'm curious what made you a pianist and a classical music aficionado. Did your parents push you to play the piano, or?
Yeah, I started with piano lessons. I played through high school with, a few breakdowns along the way, a few gaps in my studies there, and then I stopped for a couple years and picked it back up in college, and ended up studying music and comparative literature. So for me, it was certainly having music in the house. That was mostly my father, but then also playing music myself and understanding it more and more as I played more and more. And the music grows with you.
Yeah, it becomes sort of an intimate relationship.
Very much so.
Yeah. So you stayed with piano, and you still play piano?
I do, occasionally, not as much as I'd like.
Right,
but
well.
I am surrounded by Steinways, so there's really
there's no excuse.
There's no excuse. No.
No, that's great. So for parting wisdom, again, going back to our viewers, you would say encourage perhaps some instrument at some early age, just see if it's going to work, see if there's a passion, and
sure,
and having
for
it in
kids.
the house, having music
yeah,
in
and
the
if you're
home.
an adult, go ahead and go to a concert. Go to something you think you might not like, and you may surprise yourself. And that could, maybe that's classical music, maybe it's jazz, maybe it's bluegrass, maybe it's country, maybe, it's folk. But step outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And then there might be something that you latch onto, and if you do, that's great. Explore it all the more, and then there's what bad can happen, really.
Right, and what you're saying is really it can turn out to be a tremendous source of enrichment.
I think so.
Just by taking a little
chance. It worked for me.
Right.
It can work for you.
It can work for
That's
us, right. Well, I'm so glad you were able to join us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate hearing about Listen Magazine, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Marcelle.
Thanks.